Well, if you thought BTS couldn't get any bigger, it seems the sky's the limit for the South Korean boy band's popularity. Debuting at #1 for the fourth time on the US charts with its brand new hit single Butter, scooping up 4 Billboard Awards last week and featuring in the biggest US talk shows, McDonald's meals around the world, and the cover of Rolling Stone, becoming the first all-Asian act to do so in the magazine's 54-year history. BTS is painting the world pastel. The hype around them clearly goes beyond their catchy tunes, and today we take a look at the group's acclaimed status, their influence on fan society and culture, amid the continuing rise of K-pop. For this, we connect with Rani Nuttall, an essayist and lecturer of women, gender and sexuality studies at Harvard University and affiliate faculty in writing, literature and publishing at Emerson College. We also connect with David Tizzard, professor of politics at Seoul Women's University. Thank you both so much for coming on the programme. It's lovely to have you on.
Thank you.
Well,
thank you.
Rani, let's start with you first. You're joining us from Connecticut today. Well, you're a massive BTS fan yourself, and you said you're a relatively new member of ARMY, and that BTS for you has created an alternate world that you just want to escape to, particularly now. So really, what first drew you to the fan base, and what's kept you hooked?
So the fan base is interesting because I'm really new to it, as you just said, and so I don't know much about the fan base, but what I do know is post-publishing my article, I received 30 to 35 emails from people who felt the same exact way that I do. And what I think the fan base, personally, what I think the fan base has done is carved a space out in social media to connect with one another over their love of BTS. But you know, I'm now part of a BTS fans over 40 Facebook group that has over 1,300 members. And it's just this like kind of amazing space where people are just constantly posting content about BTS and expressing their love. And I think the reason why social media is the space for people to do that is because they can't admit it. They can't admit their love in the real world. So most of the emails I got were these sort of like, I'm so glad you said what you said because I can't tell my colleagues that I love BTS. They'll make fun of me. Or a Harvard professor emailed me and was like, I can't tell any of the fellow professors at Harvard because they're gonna ridicule me. It was so nice that you admitted this, you know, particularly as a scholar. So yeah, I mean that kind of connection or ability to express affection for a band that is seen as a boy band, which really is kind of a sexist construction of them, you know, kind of demeaning to young women in its description. So yeah, I'm not quite sure if that answers your question, but I'm hoping it does a little bit.
And well, Ronnie, BTS have won the social artist title several times in US award shows, proving that their success does go beyond just their showmanship. And well, you said that their popularity also lies in their ability to be vulnerable and also intimate in the relationships they forge with their fans through social media. How has that influence affected fans?
You know, I think of social media as this very performative space. You know, you're supposed to be sarcastic, pithy, you're supposed to have a one-liner that goes viral. And I think that BTS is the anti-social media that uses social media to bond with fans because they're really kind of guileless. They're performers that aren't performative, they're actors that aren't acting. And in that vulnerability, there's something kind of magnificent about them. They're each very distinct, you know, they're charming. I mean, maybe they are performing, I have no idea, I don't know them, but it doesn't feel like they are. There's this sort of affective connection that they're making with their content, with their videos. I mean, the other way that I think people are connecting is like, I go down a rabbit hole of watching reaction videos, I'm sure you know what they are, and just watching people gain happiness from watching BTS is happy making. It's kind of like I don't know, it's this long spiral into one part of the internet that isn't kind of filled with death and destruction, which is, you know, where we are right now in our world, particularly with the pandemic.
Well, I learned what reaction videos are through BTS, I think, and it's really fascinating how people in all parts of the world really come together through these videos and really engage in them, enjoy them and consume them. And David, now K-pop is no longer just consumed by Korean fans, of course, it's very global now. And you've pointed out that the meanings and the intentions of K-pop songs and videos are being dissected and generated by millions of non-Korean fans overseas. How has the globalization of K-pop really changed the industry?
It's changed it completely, really, inside and out. And it is fascinating listening to Rani speak there, that you have Facebook groups for BTS fans over 40 and things like that. One of the things that really caught my attention would be, why is it embarrassing to say that you like BTS? I mean, this is a group that sort of spreads the message of be yourself, love yourself, just be who you are. And so that there is a fear to express your joy or admiration or whatever it might be for that group is an interesting one. And I think it would be fruitful to look at why that is and where that pressure comes from. In terms of how international fans are changing the K-pop industry, if you spend some time, for example, with young South Korean students and you discuss various cultural issues with them, things such as cultural appropriation, gender identity, soft masculinity, these are not always things that are at the top of South Korean, young South Korean students' discussion points. For many of them, not all of them, but for some of them, let's say, the term cultural appropriation, they're not quite sure what it is. For example, when tourists come to South Korea, many of them are encouraged to wear hanboks and to travel around the palaces and to sort of embrace the Korean culture and wear it. Whereas in other parts of the world, to dress up in that culture's clothes or to use those hairstyles is not always seen as appropriate. So we get these two clashing values or ideas. So what happens now is K-pop groups, the entertainment companies, they're having to be more aware of international perceptions of social and cultural issues. So we see videos of trainees and idols learning about cultural appropriation, learning about hairstyles. So what I find is that, to try to sum this up, the more K-pop goes abroad and it comes out from Korea, coming in the other way, from overseas into Korea, are these cultural and social values related to appropriation and gender and sexuality that are coming back into South Korea and creating a new conversation here, whether consciously or subconsciously.
And David, the popularity of bands like BTS, they, as you said, they do appear to be sparking discussions on a number of social and cultural issues, such as the desexualization of Asian men, and mental health, social engagements of artists, and more, of course. In your view, what is the most prominent impact that the rise of K-pop groups have had, particularly in the West?
We were speaking before we came on there with Rani about sort of BTS and mental health, and how a few years ago the conversation was about that sort of BTS were speaking about social issues and writing their own songs. I hope it sort of goes back to that. With Butter and with Dynamite, they've gone more to the international market and this sort of happy message, which is a wonderful thing. But in terms of what has changed with K-pop, it's predominantly the image of Korea itself. In the 1980s, or for the longest time even, South Korea didn't always have a positive image in the wider world. People would look at it as a country that had suffered from colonization, suffered from war, suffered from authoritarian dictatorships, military dictatorships. And in the 1980s, a Made in Korea label on your clothes was one that didn't always denote quality. Now, however, if you put a Made in Korea label on a cultural product, it's cool. It signifies high-level production. It signifies sophistication. So even just the name Korea, the image Korea, because of K-pop and because of these groups, it's become cool. It's become the in thing. It won't always be like that. We know trends and fads, they change all the time. But at the moment, Korea, K-pop, the brand, it couldn't be any more popular. And congratulations to it for that.
Couldn't be any more pastel at the moment. And well, Rani, BTS certainly is becoming more socially and culturally engaged with lots of people around the world. And BTS, they donated over $1 million to the Black Lives Matter movement. And they've also promoted a mental awareness campaign, Love Myself, at the UN. Has their engagement in social issues inspired their fans even more, do you think? And do you feel that you are also becoming more dedicated to the fandom through such meaningful causes?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I wanted to add on Dr. Tizzard's point about K-pop. I think actually it's also film, Korean film, K-drama. These are all of the sort of cultural artifacts or things, genres coming out of Korea are causing the Korean wave, right? But the fact that the fans matched the donation and went above the donation when BTS did the $1 million to Black Lives Matter, it was kind of amazing that kind of phenomenon could happen. I think it was 1.3 or 1.4 million. And the mental health thing for me, my mother, we were talking about this before, my mother's from India and she was extremely mentally ill and there's no language around mental illness in India for the most part. It's changing with the youth. And to have something like BTS out there, like for a generation, to be able to have a language around being, suffering from depression, I think that's huge. And I think that the fans are being affected by that kind of transparency. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think, and I know that RM donates to multiple kind of he's a philanthropist at this point. So yeah.
Well, right now, obviously, the K-pop phenomenon is, well, it's an underestimate essentially to say that it's a big phenomenon right now. But David, you've called K-pop groups the goose with the golden eggs for the Korean economy. How much further do you think the current model of the K-pop industry can sustain? Or do you think they're going to have to make some changes to stay competitive and also appealing?
Obviously, a huge question. If I knew the future, I'd be a very popular man. Just jumping back to something that Rani picked up on and you talked about before, I taught the future of K-pop in the industry, which was about sort of the BTS and the ARMY's donation to Black Lives Matter and various altruistic things. From a personal perspective, I think it would be interesting to see more of that domestically in South Korea. We see many of these K-pop acts, not just BTS, but sort of Korean celebrities, they'll speak vocally about international movements, but it doesn't generally happen domestically. They won't come out and speak in favor of an anti-discrimination act that sort of helps to protect members, social or ethnic minorities. And why is that happening internationally, but it's not happening domestically in South Korea? That's something that I think is worth looking into. In terms of the future of the K-pop industry and economy, as you asked, I think it's really important that the government, whichever administration it is, just kind of stays out the way a little bit. There's been a Ministry of Culture and sort of Hallyu to try to move this thing forward. But if we know anything, it's that bureaucrats, old men and women in suits, they don't generally have a good barometer of what is cool for young people around the world. So as it goes forward, just let the artists be themselves, give them freedom, give them control, let them become auteurs like we see Bong Joon-ho doing, complete freedom just to express themselves. And, for people in South Korea, they become daepyo, they become national representatives, and a whole lot of focus and attention is placed onto them. The weight of the world, the weight of South Korea, I should say, is sometimes on their shoulders. Just let them be free. Just let them be artists and let them explore. It will change. There will come a point where the global sort of trend goes towards something else, and that's to be expected. That's what happens in not just pop culture, but fashion, and trends are cyclical. So when it does move, I just hope that South Korea retains a sense of confidence in its own ability, because it's not always about international success. It's about creativity and self-confidence and just doing it for that reason alone.
Right, really best not to bring the bureaucracy into it. And well, Rani, the music industry in the US, it's obviously currently dominated by songs in English, and well, BTS has faced some racism and colonialist attitudes regarding music that you've also pointed out. Do you see the music industry changing and sort of evolving away from these attitudes with the rise of non-American bands singing in languages other than English, such as BTS?
I don't know. I think that if BTS had won the Grammy, then yes. And I think the fact that again, I don't know if this is completely true, but I think the fact that BTS is making music in English because I think they might feel like they have to in order to get that Grammy is illustrative of the fact that I don't think the industry is changing that much. That said, the industry does have to reckon with the fans, and there are a lot of fans, right? And so I see a few things changing. I see, you know, Bad Bunny is a very famous artist, you know, globally as well, like BTS. And, you know, when he gets an award, it's always in the Latin award section, which is another illustration of how the industry hasn't changed, and that, you know, English is sort of the epicenter of the you know, supposed universal language. But, you know, when he accepts awards, he accepts them in Spanish, which I find really, you know, powerful, that he doesn't sort of say, I have to, you know, accept this in English. The other thing that I think, you know, that BTS has done that's really interesting is I wanted to write a paper about it, is the last two times they performed Dynamite, once at the MTV Music Awards, which was in New York, and then at the Grammys, which was in LA. At the end of both of those performances, they actually situated, so in the first one, the MTV Music Awards performance, there were different shots of New York. There was the Brooklyn Bridge, and then there was sort of the skyline, the infamous skyline. At the very end, I'm pretty sure the backdrop, the green screen was Seoul. And then at the Grammys, similarly, they had recreated the LA Convention Center inside, and then by the end, they were on a rooftop, a high-rise, and they were performing, you know, against the Seoul skyline. I think bands are doing the work, and the fans are doing the work to change the industry, but the industry's barely budging, in my opinion.
Well, hopefully we'll see more creativity and hopefully no bureaucracy in terms of the evolution of K-pop. And well, I'm afraid we're out of time, so this is where we'll have to leave it for today. That was Rani Nitu, essayist and lecturer of Women, Gender and Sexuality Studies at Harvard University, and David Tizzard, Professor of Politics at Seoul Women's University. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.